Hello and welcome to Tête à Tête, France 24's flagship interview show. Our guest today is Haiti's Foreign Minister, Dominique Dupuy. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me today. I'm happy to be here.
On October the 3rd, a terrible massacre took place in the city of Pont-Sondé. At least 117 civilians were killed by a gang, apparently called Gran Grif. The survivors have criticized the authorities for not being responsive enough. They say the gang had posted on social media what they would do, and it still happened. Why is that?
This massacre on October 3rd is indeed a very tragic moment, and I can tell you that it has shaken the entire Haitian people, wherever they may be. What we know is that immediately following the news of this incident and this very tragic incident, the government moved about 100 armored vehicles from the metropolitan area to Pont-Sondé. About 80 specialized troops were moved also by helicopter. The government has newly acquired through lease helicopters that we didn't have before in order to move specialized troops to be able to address the current situation in Pont-Sondé. Immediate action was taken to reinforce the hospital's capacity because beyond, unfortunately, the dead, we also have many wounded that needed to be tended to and that didn't have the proper capacity in the neighboring hospitals. The Prime Minister himself flew to the area where he was able to tend to the sick and the wounded in the hospital that were being tended to. So what we are seeing today is a growing tendency for gangs to expand beyond the metropolitan area. We, of course, knew this could have been expected as we push and we pressure them in the metropolitan area. If we do not have the capacity to consolidate the northern and southern axis, they push north, they push south in order to provoke reactions from the armed forces and the police forces that we have. And what we need is better support, more troops, more equipment, more air support, more maritime support, more armored vehicles in order to have an overwhelming capacity, overwhelming force to respond to this very potent threat.
But isn't this a message from the gangs to the government as an international force is arriving to deal with them? Aren't they sending the message? We're the strong guys. The government is just running after us.
Our message is that we need to move faster, we need to move better, and the international community needs to understand that the support we need needs to come now. We cannot allow for any further massacres to happen and civilians to be taken hostage any longer by these gangs. We are a people of 12 million being held hostage by about 2,000 bandits. There's nothing unsolvable if we have the proper equipment, if we have the proper funding. We have the determination to not only answer, but to at least isolate these situations. We cannot do it right now, and this is a message we're trying to get across everywhere through my voice, through the CPT's voice, through the Prime Minister's voice, everywhere we go, articulating the fact that there needs to be urgent and better accompaniment of Haiti in order to face this very, very dire situation where, unfortunately, children, women, civilians are the first ones to pay the very high price.
Some gang leaders, I think of Jimmy Cherizier, known as Barbecue, have said, we're ready to discuss with the government. If we get a share of the pie, that's fine. Why not? Why not, if the situation is so dire, negotiate with the gangs?
The reality, Mr. Perelman, is that our history is shaped by impunity. What we are seeing today is people that are emboldened by the idea that there are no consequences to their acts. It's very difficult for us to think of the people that were massacred on the night of October 3rd and tell their families that if someone from Gran Grif just wants to discuss with us today, they can just have an office next door and we can sit down and they can resume their lives as if nothing happened. This would be a very dangerous precedent to set as we try to cope with a growing disease of gang presence. We also have to talk about the need to reinforce our justice system and to make sure that for generations and generations to come, people know that they will be held accountable for their actions and that justice will prevail in a climate where what we've seen basically is the collapse of this justice system that we are direly trying to reinforce.
Right. So the magic bullet, quote unquote, is this international force to support the Haitian police. The theory was that there would be 2,500, even up to 2,900 men, but that's not what you're witnessing on the ground, is it? Can you tell us what the situation is?
There is no magic bullet. What we have is a government that is determined to lead a transition that can end by February 7th, 2026, when we will be able to pass on the leadership to a democratically elected government. In order to do so, we know now what we didn't know earlier. No one had engaged with the gangs before. This current government, through the Prime Minister, is the first to actively lead an attack against the gangs in one of the 14 occupied neighborhoods in the metropolitan area. What we've learned from this attack, we didn't know before. Every assessment that was made on the security situation was grossly underestimated. Every assessment that we thought of what it took in terms of funding, in terms of equipment, in terms of troops, was grossly underestimated. What we saw by facing these gangs for weeks on and weeks out is that they're extremely agile, they're extremely determined, they're extremely equipped, and they will not back down. We will not back down either. What we need now is more than ever a strong, uninterrupted support for the efforts that are courageously being led by the police forces, by the army that has been reinstituted, and by the 400 Kenyans and the 20 Jamaican and Belizean that have joined forces with us. We cannot win this without air support. We cannot win this by maritime support. We cannot win this if we are running short of bullets, running short of equipment every time we attack the gangs. And this is what we're saying. No silver bullet, but there is a path forward. This is solvable.
But how many men are being deployed for this international mission? I said the theory was up to 2,900. How many will effectively be deployed?
The assessment was for 2,500 for the MSS.
Right.
What we know today is we'll have 1,000 by November.
Less than half.
This is grossly insufficient. And this is why we're requesting that this mission be transitioned to a standard peacekeeping operation, peacekeeping mission, in order for us to ensure that we do not run short of equipment, men, funding, and most importantly, of the necessary mechanisms that we will need in order to ensure viable, credible elections by November 2025.
But this proposal to have this as a UN peacekeeping forces was rejected by the UN Security Council, especially by Russia and China. Why would this happen? Because if this doesn't happen, the promises of money and men are not going to happen.
Two reasons. What we know today is that we have the Haitian government's entire commitment for this transition, and we're doing the legwork. We're entering the meeting rooms, and we're lobbying and doing the work that we need to do to defend our own position based on our own assessment. The second information that we have is that when we were lobbying for this last year through third parties, allies, and friends, we did not have any assessment on what it took to win this on the ground. We now know this. We're able to show the statistics of what this battle looks like. And with this information, we're convinced that we can have a very strong case for this resolution to be adopted.
How many men do you need from the international forces?
What we know is about 20 years ago, when the situation was a lot less difficult on the humanitarian scale, on the security scale, we had about 14,000 men. And today, we cannot be expected to face a much more difficult, a much more complex situation with a lot more equipment facing us through the gangs.
So you would need, what, 20,000 troops?
This would be an assessment that we would make jointly with our partners.
But it's not a wild guess.
Over 14,000.
Over 14,000.
Yes.
I want to get quickly to the tense relationship with your neighbor, the Dominican Republic. Their president had recently said that he wants to improve relations that have been tense since he decided to close the borders last year. However, on October the 2nd, his government announces that they would throw out 10,000 Haitians per week, and they've started enforcing this. What is your reaction to this decision?
It is their sovereign right to decide how they lead their migratory policy. What we denounce is the way every single Haitian is being denied their basic human rights through this process. We see children being separated from their breastfeeding mothers. We see young girls being dropped on the border unaccompanied. We see people being put in cages on the sole basis that they are too dark, that they look Haitian, without any verification of their paperwork. And this is what we're denouncing.
It's racism?
I believe so. I believe this is racist, and I believe that this is intentional, and I believe that it will further destabilize Haiti. And I believe that we need to at least request that there be some respect of some basic rules in this process, that 10,000 Haitians be deported every week is their right, but that they be deported in the established drop-off zones and the established schedules with the proper registries for us to make sure that we're accounted for every single one and that we can care to the best of our abilities with our partners for them as they enter the territory. Some of them have never been in Haiti, and it's going to be an extremely complicated process that we will step up for in order to make sure that we can offer them some degree of dignity in this very unfortunate decision.
Last question. Donald Trump recently claimed that Haitians in the city of Springfield, Ohio, were eating cats and dogs. He's also promised to throw out the Haitians who entered through a humanitarian program, the U.S. How concerned are you if he's reelected for the Haitian community in the U.S.?
First of all, I can't help but have a special thought for all the people in the world who actually do eat cats and dogs. And this shouldn't be a reason to ostracize anyone, but we as Haitians don't. And it's unfortunate that Haitians, again, and we've seen this so many times throughout history, are being used as scapegoats for electoral purposes. And this is, I'll leave it at that. I don't think there's any actual intent, and I hope that the American people is smart enough to read through the fact that this is just campaign rhetoric. However, the impact of this rhetoric is very real. The threats on Haitians, the feeling of insecurity, the feeling of dehumanization is real, and this is why we decided to stand up and speak out against these declarations, because they set a very dangerous precedent for other people, other places, as you know, looking to our neighbors, to feel emboldened to lead not only such discourse, but lead such policies towards Haitians.
Dominique Dupuy, I want to thank you very much for appearing here on France 24, and thank you for watching this interview.